Well, hello, everyone. Today is Friday, the 14th of November. My name is Teresa Manning, and I am the Policy Director of the National Association of Scholars and also the President of the Virginia affiliate of the National Association of Scholars. I have with me today, as I have had on prior episodes, Jared Gould, who is the editor of the online publication for the National Association of Scholars, Minding the Campus. We are trying to do news roundups on a regular basis. We apologize because we're new and still finding our footing. I keep suggesting maybe Thursday afternoon, but it turns out that we do whatever works. It has been a while. A lot has happened, including the Charlie Kirk assassination. For my part, I thought maybe it was best actually to back off at that point, to let that play out. That was such a traumatic and painful thing. And then the National Association of Scholars had its board meeting at the end of October. Here we are in middle of November. But welcome, Jared. How are you doing today?
Good. It's been very busy. So a lot has been done in the time that we have had a lapse in our meetings.
Yes. So we're looking forward to what we discuss. We can't cover it all, of course. I don't know how long we'll go today. We try to keep this between 30 and 45 minutes. But I really wanted to discuss at least a little bit President Trump's higher education compact with colleges and universities, which was released on October 1st. Secondly, so that's still fresh, but it's not the latest news. More recently, however, President Trump had an interview with Laura Ingraham on Fox News where they covered the question of foreign students on the American college campus and also the H-1B visa issue. And the National Association of Scholars has been a leader on alerting people to the presence of foreign influence in higher education, specifically the national security interests that are jeopardized. We had a high profile case with Charles Lieber, the chair of the chemistry department at Harvard, who was convicted of not reporting, not disclosing certain ties with China's Thousand Talents program. But he's one of many cases pursued by the Justice Department. So this is an area that needs exploration. Jared, for his part, wanted to discuss a few articles that he had authored, one on dating, I believe, one on the diversity ideology still on campus, including at our military schools. And what was the third, Jared?
Social and emotional learning.
Social and emotional learning. Okay. So with that as the menu, if you'll indulge me, Jared, I'll just say my piece about this compact with American higher education, which the Trump administration released on October 1st. It was an odd thing because it was released only to 9 schools. It was done in sort of an outreach, friendly overture. Here are some things that we would like to see schools do. We're only approaching these 9 schools, but if you agree to these things, we will give you it wasn't really all that clear. We will give you
Yeah.
preferences in contracts. We won't scrutinize what you are doing. So it had a certain ambiguity about it. And I would say, maybe a certain weakness, because when you reviewed the provisions in the compact, it was stuff these schools are supposed to be doing already. It was
Yeah.
like, don't discriminate in admissions, be a place of fair play, don't price gouge your students. How about not racking up tuition while you distribute wealth among your student body? Don't have excessive numbers of foreign students, which of course the Congress has already said we need to watch because they're supposed to be reporting the foreign funds that they are taking. So in this
Well,
sort of
the big problem there with the foreign student was, as you know, they wanted to put a cap on the undergraduate student population, but even the percentage of the cap was not really low enough. I think they capped it at what, 15%, and most schools are not even at 15% already. The undergraduate foreign student population is, I think, roughly 7% at some universities, and that number is already too big. And then, of course, the administration totally missed what actually mattered, which was the graduate schools.
Right, right.
That's where the foreign students are.
So a lot of issues here, and sort of unfortunate because the administration has been aware of the problems of higher education probably more than any administration in recent history. Um, but it was a position of weakness. Like, we'd like to suggest that you follow the law. You know, now, I first reacted that the compact would have benefited from introductory provisions that would begin with whereas. Whereas tuition has skyrocketed, almost tripled in the past 30 years, much more than any other sector of the economy, including high inflation sectors such as medical care. Whereas 95% of faculty within American higher education come from one of the two political parties. Whereas there is evidence on the ground that classrooms are not teaching, but rather indoctrinating and serve as venues for these faculty members to peddle their ideology. Whereas every survey of graduates of American colleges and universities show increasing ignorance regarding American civics, regarding worldwide matters, geopolitical issues, and of course, financial literacy because they're signing on to these student loans and then find that they can't repay them. Whereas we have all this evidence that you guys are messing up. And it is our responsibility to bring you back in line or else. But it wasn't like that. And so the schools were in the position of w- we get to do whatever we want right now, and nobody is supervising us. So no, we are not
No.
interested in this compact, which is exactly what which is exactly what 7 of the 9 schools have said. It included
Yeah.
MIT, the University of Pennsylvania, the University of Virginia. Surprise, surprise, they don't wanna play ball. They like it exactly the way it is. They take the money and they spit on the American public and the American taxpayers, and they want these graduates basically to be propagandized. They don't care that they are ignorant. If the goal is to mobilize their political, uh, what would you call it, foot soldiers, they're doing exactly what they want. At least one could infer from
Yeah.
what they are doing that this is the goal. So, surprise, surprise, the schools did not bite. And how does the Trump administration look now? There just should be more authority. It should be more of an enforcement of what existing law demands. We do have the Supreme Court opinion, Students for Fair Admission, which absolutely says no racial preferences in admissions, doesn't want racial preferences anywhere, including in grading, in hiring. Uh, that's
Yeah.
the
But
legal
the,
authority that
but
Trump could have led with. So,
yeah, the institutions are already trying to work their way around the racial discrimination by developing other ways to recruit students, such as looking at zip codes,
yes,
which is clearly a way to discriminate on the basis of race.
yes,
But you asked the question, what does this make the administration look like? It effectively makes it look like any other Republican administration, which I would argue for the last 50 years is that they run like Republicans when they campaign, but they rule like Democrats. There is really no, it's really unfortunate because there was a lot of promise out of the administration, and he has now done a lot of 180s. Um, and, again, I think, as they say in Texas, it's all hat, no cattle. Um, you put out this compact, it really does nothing, even if the universities accepted it. Um, so, what do you do?
Yes. Well, let's be fair. The Trump administration has done some very good things. They are going after DEI ideology. They are reducing the education department. They have cited the Students for Fair Admissions, which of course gives them a lot of authority to go after all of this racial neo-racism, neo-segregation. So more than prior administrations, they seem to have targeted higher education, and rightly so. But this compact was kind of a curious overture. Um, we weren't prepared for it. It was hard for us to, I mean, we have defended it. Our president,
Mhm.
Peter Wood, has defended it and recommended it, taken issue a little bit with institutional neutrality. But the whole vibe was not really easy to defend because this is really what schools are supposed to be doing anyway. And the big problem here is that they don't follow the law.
Yeah,
Um, they do what they want without scrutiny. The money continues to flow. There really is no reason for them to change course. And if you're going to be serious about higher education reform, it has to be better than these friendly overtures when in fact you are dealing with bad actors. And on that point, the House Education Committee and the Senate Education Committee last month and this month, respectively, held hearings on the financial aspect of our higher education system. And a lot of testimony, specifically by an administrator at Grove City College in Pennsylvania, then also Preston Cooper, a senior fellow at American Enterprise Institute. Their testimony talked about the grotesque gamesmanship in tuition pricing, where they give what are called unfunded discounts, which are sort of bogus. They're not charging the actual cost to educate a student, and instead they throw out a false anchor number, and then they say, but for you, we'll give you a $10,000 discount, or for you, we'll give you a 20,000 discount. And the reality is that favored students, that is Democrat, feminist, their political pet projects get huge discounts in reality,
yeah,
whereas other students who are not diverse, who don't contribute to the politicization, are given discounts, which actually the students are paying more than the actual cost of their attendance. So it's a hall of mirrors. And then, even worse, the amount of the tuition changes. So you get one tuition rate your first year, but then they feel free to increase that tuition your second and third year after you've gotten comfortable, gotten to know your classmates.
yeah.
Who is, this is just a carte blanche, a blank check for
Yeah.
the ideologues running American higher education.
Well, even when you take the politics out of it, I think the disaster with tuition is when you look at institutions like U Chicago, for example, which I've written on recently, they're not even using the tuition revenue to actually spend it on educating the students.
Right.
They're giving the tuition dollars to their own faculty and staff to go start these venture capital projects that more often than not fail, and the university loses money on these partnership investments. It's a complete abandonment of what the institution is supposed to be doing, which is educating students, and they're not even using the tuition to do that. Far be it from, as you had mentioned, just of course, you have these venture capital projects that fail, but then the other money that is put into the tuition is spent on these political projects like indoctrinating on DEI or the social emotional learning in teachers' colleges, or any leftist political poison, yeah, that you can name.
Exactly. So, we appreciate the spotlight being on higher ed finance. We appreciate the Trump administration paying attention, But we need to get serious. You know, American students are hurting. They are being impoverished by this system while other people are being enriched. And we have to be serious about these problems. We have to diagnose the problem correctly, to course correct correctly. And that leads us, as we mentioned, one of the provisions of the compact was on foreign students on the American college campus, seeking to cap the percentage. But even that bypassed completely the graduate level, which is arguably where the important
Mm.
preparation for American industry is. And that's a segue into the Laura Ingraham interview with President Trump, which was um, shocking, shocking, I think. And is
And
this the
insulting.
is this the real Trump? Truly, it was insulting to the country. It was insulting to our young people. In brief, Trump is proposing doubling the number of Chinese students who come to America on the grounds that American students are not prepared for important fields and are not qualified for those important fields. As I mentioned, NAS has done a lot of work on the soft power of the Chinese communist power coming in to college campuses. We've had cases against Charles Lieber and others like him, where they are stealing technology and sharing with a hostile foreign nation, things that we know. But the real kick in the teeth is saying that America itself does not have talent. Now, what's really going on is that the Chinese students are buying, they are paying full price and are a cash cow for colleges
Yeah.
and universities who are for sale. Now, this is obviously hugely problematic because the premise of education is that it is for the American public interest, and they get tax breaks, they get special status because they're supposed to be in the public interest. And yet here they are taking cash from foreigners who are operating against the American interest by stealing technology and know-how, and then displacing America's own young people. So I'll stop, let you comment, Jared.
Yeah, I mean, this is a a crisis that I've written on myself, but I think the expert to look to on our staff is Ian Oxnevad, who has written several of these China reports, several essays on China with clear documentation about the espionage that they're committing against this country. Every single Chinese national that is in this country is a security risk. Um, they are closely tied with the CCP. They are here to steal American technology. It's why they go into STEM programs. You know, they're not going into, arguably somebody's going to say, oh, some of them have gone into the humanities. Most of them are going into STEM programs
Right, right.
because they take this technology that they learn in US institutions and use it to advance Chinese energy, but mostly their military applications. Most bizarrely is our weather programs. You know, America developed all these cloud seeding programs, and Chinese nationals who studied at our institutions stole that technology and are now using cloud seeding for military applications against their own neighbors. Um, it's just it's so clearly wrong that he would say we should have 600,000 here. The most interesting thing about it, right, was his justification to Laura Ingraham was, well, it wasn't just the talent thing, which I thought was insulting for him to say that Americans are just talentless, but also that we need these students to keep the universities open. And Trump has of all people, he has no interest in keeping these institutions open because the institutions are against him. They
It's
create
so true.
Democrats. They
They
create
are
left
such never Trumpers. It's so true. Why is he protecting these institutions who hate him?
It makes absolutely no sense. Even
Instead of investing in the young people who voted for him. What's up?
yeah. Um, well, as you know, to bring it back to where we intersect on this, where we bring the compact into is the intersection of the H-1B problem. And That
That
is
also came up, right, that was
yeah,
also
that
in
is
the Laura Ingraham, and he wants to increase the number of H-1B, but of course, you've always pointed out this connection. These are connected issues. They come in through the colleges and the universities, then they stay.
yeah,
So, yes, that too, I think he said there was, not enough talent. He talked about a Georgia factory with South Korean workers. This is a real head scratcher because
yeah,
what are we're talking about on the job training. We're talking about taking able-bodied, capable young Americans and putting them obviously in positions they can do.
yeah,
This is by all indications just a cheap labor. They're just going to get
yeah.
people on the cheap, and they're going to what, give Americans pot and fentanyl and pornography. I mean, that's
And the bureaucratic nonsense of having to get a entry level job at, a corporation, um, it's beyond kind of unbelievable that he would have this position and do kind of a 180 on this policy, particularly when he ran his whole campaign against this issue. And you have JD Vance in the vice president's office saying the exact same thing on multiple occasions. But the thing is far be it from any of the conversations or the points that Donald Trump made in that interview. I think the assumption that anybody would have gotten from listening to him talk is that we don't have qualified Americans right now. But that's even not true. It's not that we just have to train our own people. It's that we already have qualified people available for these jobs.
yes. I
There
think
are
Helen Andrews made that point. We are displacing actually our best and brightest.
Yeah, we
There
are displacing our best and brightest. I mean, if you just look at the tech industry, I wrote this article probably at the end of September. If you look at the data, the tech companies said that they had to hire foreign nationals because they didn't have enough qualified um, computer engineering graduates. There's so many computer engineering graduates who are Americans who could easily fill these jobs.
yeah.
It is just an excuse for cheap labor.
Yes. I mean, on its face, people should be able to figure this out. We are a country of 340 million people. The idea that we don't have within that population what we need is on its face ridiculous. Especially since we were such a leading country. I mean, we are a superpower. This um I always bring up how I was a visa student in Canada, and my parents met at a Canadian university. And every time I crossed that border to go to school, I was reminded I could not take a job from a Canadian. They had to see my bank account. I showed it every time I crossed that border. I had to show that I'd been admitted to the university. Their policy was Canadian jobs were for Canadians. Fair. That's fair. My presence in Canada was just to be a student. So, none of it adds up other than to see this as a race to the bottom, cheap labor, and Americans who cares. It's
Yeah.
it's almost indefensible, and, of course, the noteworthy thing is, as you say, it is such a 180 from how Trump rode into town in
Yeah.
2016. You know, where did he go? So we're in a bit of a spot because we wanna commend the administration for paying attention, for doing the good things they're doing. But if you're just going to undo with your right hand all the good stuff you did with your left, that leaves us at the status quo, and that's not improvement.
Exactly. I agree with you. Um, I don't know what more I could say on the issue because
Right.
it's such a frustrating issue.
Yeah, we'll try to link the compact and then maybe those House hearings and Senate hearings, and I'll be writing on this. So why don't we proceed to the articles that you've written? Um, uh, Tell
Yeah.
us. I'm sort of interested about the dating one.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this one, I'll quickly go through it, but there is a what I called a romance recession on college campuses. Uh, the boys and girls are not dating anymore, and I think the reason for that really boils down to 3 issues. One is the algorithm on the dating apps, is against men in particular. So there's already a population, or a user problem with, like, Tinder and Bumble and Hinge. There's more men on them than there are women, and so
Oh,
already the odds are stacked against men.
okay.
But in addition to that, there is algorithmic tools that these apps use in order to rate men's attractiveness, and it'll do, like, scans of a man's face, see what the proportions are, and rate your attractiveness. The women are going to see the most attractive men using the app, and so, um, it's stacked against ordinary men, for that reason.
Yeah, this is interesting because it's like a lot of online stuff. It's one step forward, two steps back. I mean, you think this is so convenient. You use your card, you pay with PayPal or pay with your phone. But what's the price of that? Is that we're getting tracked with all of our transactions. What about the Canadian truckers who protested the lockdowns and then they lost access to all their financial accounts? So it's convenient, of course,
Yeah.
to try to meet people online, but who is dealing the cards? Who is pulling these strings? And this is kind of disturbing
Yeah.
information that it's almost like they're playing matchmaker without people realizing
Yeah.
it.
Now I list the hard data in my article. I can't recall the specific numbers, but if my recollection serves me well, it was something like for every 100 swipes, or for every 100 profiles that a man sees, he'll like 30 of them. But for every 100 profiles a woman looks at, she only likes 3. So, women are highly selective, the men are not as selective. So again, you're already the stacks are against men on the dating apps. Where it gets, gender neutral is on the political polarization problem. Uh, Women are going really far left, the men are going really far right, which is, of course, creating a crisis of compatibility. Uh, as I said in my article, what, no leftist woman, for example, is going to wanna date a right-wing man, and no right-wing man wants to date a leftist woman, and as the polarization keeps spreading, to the right and left, the amount of people available for compatibility shrinks. So,
Right, right.
the it, but then I also say that higher education has played its role in this crisis because it has promoted a culture of careerism, but also the hookup culture,
Yes.
particularly with leftist professors and college administrators that throw these insane parties on campus like Sex in the Dark. Harvard has a sex week where you learn how to hook up with other students. And so already the boundaries of sex have been completely rewritten by the colleges. At the same time, the careerism mindset, and this is what Helen Andrews pointed out in her recent article on Compact, is uh, they are more focused now on careerism. The women simply don't want to date men anymore because they want the C-suite offices. I actually think that it's really interesting when you poll men. More men now actually want a wife and a family, but more women want to focus on their career. And it's a huge flop from, probably a generation ago, where if you had polled, men and women, the answers would have been different. And this has no doubt been the seed of this has been sowed by colleges and universities and just the general culture at large that has told women that being a wife is a horrible idea.
Yes, a lot of this is age related. You say one thing when you're 20 and you say another when you're 40. And having children and having a family life is something that does become very important as you get older for both support when you get sick, but also company and also fulfillment. I think most people in their even 30s and 40s at some point get disillusioned with their jobs. They're dispensable in their jobs. You know, they're just like tissue paper. You can be replaced, and if you're devoting all your energies to that, and then you find yourself laid off in your 40s, not enjoying what you work, you've built nothing else. You've invested in nothing else. But 20 something women don't know this. And of course, to some extent, that information and perspective has been withheld so that they can sort of wander in these illusions or delusions that what they think is pleasurable and fulfilling in their 20s will be for the rest of their lives. So it really is an injustice, I think, to young women. And of course, they have a biological clock. So if they decide to avoid marriage and motherhood, not knowing that actually a large part of life happens after 30, 35, and 40. You've
Yeah.
still got 40 and 50 years on this earth. And
Yeah.
if you've only invested in a career where you can be fired at will, you could be a lonely, isolated
Yeah.
person. Uh, that's the wisdom of grown-ups that is being withheld from young people because bad people are our rulers and don't want our young people to know that. So
Yeah.
that's a key thing is that they're asking, what do people in their 20s know? Nothing really. I mean, I love people
Yeah.
in their 20s, and they're really funny but they're in their 20s. They haven't,
Yeah.
they haven't lived life and they don't have the benefit of looking back the way older experienced people do, and that's why we do have the wisdom of grown-ups, which is nowhere to be seen.
Yeah. Um, well, at the end of the day, you don't have just the individual crisis of loneliness. And in fact, the loneliness rates of men have grown exceedingly high, but of women too. It's not just the men that are lonely, the women are lonely as well. But
Yes.
but with this, you have, in my opinion, a growing civilizational crisis. Civilizations are built by marriages. If men and women are not able to communicate with each other because they're so polarized and because they have completely different ideas about what makes a good life, the civilization is going to die.
Well, it's so funny you mentioned that. I've been giving a fair amount of thought to that lately. Some people might balk at that proposition. You know, to them, marriage is sexual pleasure, hanging out with somebody I want, being happy, not realizing that um, that is a civilization or a lack of civilization of its own. They've adopted a hedonistic, short-term consumerist view of marriage, and they've rejected, and that is their civilization: hedonism, consumerism, me first. Um, and they are rejecting us, the civilization that they were given, from which they have benefited. So it's just funny because they're not really aware of the waters in which they swim and what they're doing to the waters.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. But in terms of our civilizational crisis, I will shift to uh, what is more of a civilizational. Our civilization is at a crisis because of multiple things, not just the marriages, but also because,
Sure.
of course, the political indoctrination in schools, which is a good way to talk about social and emotional learning. This article was not one that I really had that great of interest in searching for because a lot of it's really hard to piece together. So I was up for hours actually just trying to search for the information on where social and emotional learning originated, and what it's turned into. Um, and this article popped off. Everybody is extremely interested in this $10 billion Trojan horse that has entered our K 12 system. It started in the 90s as this kind of emotional intelligence pedagogy where
Mm,
they kind of thought, "Oh, well, we need to be sensitive to the kids' emotions because we have to be able to deal with anger issues." So if a kid, for example, is gets really frustrated because he can't solve the problem, he can't solve 2 plus 2, we have to handle the emotion. Well, maybe in the 90s that was something that you should have pursued, but what this has transitioned into is a surveillance project where kids are surveyed by their teachers what their like basically a psychological analysis of these kids. It's all of this data is stored on servers against parental consent.
mhm.
More than that, it's completely turned into a political indoctrination problem, especially since the social and emotional learning pivoted to transformative social and emotional learning,
Of
which now
course.
which now interjects wokeism, DEI, and interestingly enough, LGBTQ plus IA stuff into the curriculum. One of the things that I mentioned in the piece was there seems to be this link between the proponents of social emotional learning and those who are proponents of affirmative care for gender dysphoria.
Ah,
Um, there's a lady who's actually her title is the queer mathematics teacher, and she states that she has a radical pedagogy for transformative SEL mathematical liberation, which she says teaches at the intersection of math and two SL LGBTQIA plus ideology.
mm.
So I'm not really sure what that looks like in a classroom, why math has anything to do with gender identity. But that's what social and emotional learning has transformed into. We have people with actual titles of queer mathematics teacher teaching in our schools. And I think that's absolutely bonkers.
Yeah. I always like to say we shouldn't focus on DEI, affirmative action, SEL, racial preferences, all of these novel approaches and methodologies really are guilty until proven innocent. They're trying to displace really classical learning and the classical virtues of courage and temperance and fortitude. And th- we forget that they have smashed that to smithereens and now they're introducing their newfangled social engineering.
Yeah.
So we're for the restoration of Western civilization, the classic virtues, and anything, riding in on this horse with these fancy names and euphemisms, these are all guilty until proven innocent. And from what I could tell, they're just guilty.
Yeah.
These people, of course, are the same people who are smashing home life, advocating sexual promiscuity so that marriages are unstable, so that spouses leave each other. And of course, children then reflect the instability that they have at home. This happens in the inner city, it happens in rural America. Increasingly, it's the norm in American families. So, behavioral problems are a result of that instability of grown-ups really putting themselves first and not prioritizing a stable, happy home life. So if we want well-adjusted, well-behaved children, we have to bring back stable homes. But these people are on the other side. They,
Yeah,
they
clearly.
are, all of social engineering is smashing what's there organically and in nature and then coming up with some newfangled
Yeah.
solution. So
Yeah.
it's highly suspect. And where does that leave us? Well, the homeschooling skyrocketing. People, as we know, because of COVID,
Yeah.
parents for the first time really saw a lot of this ideology in full force, and homeschooling had already been a real success story. It's even more so now. There are other things like classical schools charter schools, those are doing well, but the standard public schools, I don't know, Jared, what do you think? I mean, should we just say
Um,
forget them?
what I think is when I have kids, they're not going to public schools. I don't even think that I would send them to a private institution, even a private Catholic institution, because at this point, even the religious schools have been gripped by
Right,
stuff.
right,
Um, they're these Christian schools are no more Christian than, I don't know, some guy that I don't know, just doesn't have any Christian beliefs at all. They're
right.
they're, eh, they're nominal at best,
Yep.
and I think the only way to keep your child away from this is actually homeschooling them. The difficulty is who actually has the means to do that. You
Right.
know
Well, the whole system is set up to discourage that. So now you need two incomes. So
Yeah,
mom and dad both have to work. The public schools become sort of a daycare.
yeah,
They don't want to be paying for that on top of all their other costs. And this gets into the question of our economy, which I'm sure we have a lot to say about. But just, I always say the idea that you would hand the minds and souls of your children over to people you don't really know, much less people who might not like you, might disagree with everything you believe in, might
well,
want to hurt you, might
that
want to hurt our civilization.
that's a really good point because, this is especially a concern now knowing what we know about the teachers' colleges. I mean, this has become it's a cyclical cycle, right? It's like, well, you graduate you graduate the professors from college who are themselves indoctrinated into this leftist stuff. They they force that onto their students who go and get the teacher licensure programs, and then those people go into the K-12 schools,
Right.
and now you have this huge cycle of, perpetual left-wing indoctrination. um, that's a totally legitimate concern. I mean, I've seen with, some of these K-12 teachers in preschool classrooms and in kindergarten classrooms, they have, like, LGBTQ flags in their classroom, or they're training their students to use they, them
Right.
pronouns and dismantling the gender patriarchy stuff. It's just so unbelievably stupid, um, and,
The implosion of religion needs to answer for this as well. I mean, there is a vacuum of moral leadership and moral character that they are filling, and that vacuum resulted from the churches no longer teaching the gospel, no longer really wanting traditional Christianity. They've gone along with abortion, divorce, fornication. Now we're into the gender ideology. That moral vacuum is now being filled by these political ideologies. And it
yeah,
also explains the return of more traditional religious sensibilities. As we've discussed within the Catholic space, for example, traditional Catholicism is returning. That might be the case also in other Christian sects. I don't know. But
yeah.
we can't forget that the vacuum was created by that. And uh, the priests and the people who were responsible, the shepherds who were supposed to lead the sheep. That's, I think, where a lot of the fault lies, although that could be a more involved conversation as well.
Yeah, that should probably be its own conversation. Of course, we are in this predicament because the church relinquished its authority to the government, and the government has, disassociated itself with, the church by and large. And so, what you get out of that, you get a secular society that really has no, um, moral foundation to guide it, which is, of course, why we have all this, which is why we're dealing with all of these, um,
Well, and
ideologies that challenge nature.
yes. Well, let's also add that in the West, because the West was the Christian West, it was Christendom, the idea that we would have a secular society is anti-Christian. It had to be because it was already a Christian civilization. So if you move from a Christian civilization to a secular, you are de-Christianizing your civilization, and that's essentially anti-Christian, but it wasn't presented that way. It was we can all get along. Then suddenly abortion is rampant, divorce is rampant, gender ideology is rampant because we took for granted that we had Christian premises on the sanctity of human life, on the integrity of marriage and human sexuality. But once we agreed to de-Christianization, all of that went out the window. And now we are in an anti Christian moment. And I don't know that we can restore Western civilization without a restoration of that religious sensibility. But is there a third article that we did
Yeah.
the SEL one and the
Yeah.
dating recession, and
Yeah.
I'm with you 100%. I'm very concerned about you didn't even mention population implosion, right?
Yeah.
That how can we preserve Western peoples if
Well,
Western men and women are at each other's throats, and this is by design.
yeah. Well, real quick, we're not having really a population implosion problem because the country, both Democrats and Republicans, have imported, people from other places in order to replace the population, in order to keep up with the birth dearth. So
Right.
that's been their solution. It's just
Yes.
pretty evident that's their solution. Chuck Schumer said so on Capitol Hill. What was it? Maybe 2 years into the Biden administration, he said that the reason we have to have all of these immigrants here, brought to the United States is because there's a birth dearth, and these people that they're bringing in are going to be the basis for supporting the social programs. They're going to work and be
Right.
taxed to support
Right.
Social Security, to support Medicaid. But again, that's a whole nother conversation. So we talked about the dating article, the social and emotional learning article. Both of those took off. Got a lot of views on the website. Encourage people to go reread them if you haven't read them. And if you haven't read them, read them and then share them. Um, the last one is one that I published yesterday, which was on these really bizarre assignments
Ah,
issued to a student at Texas State in a communications class.
right.
Um, the assignments, one of them was called a self-disclosure exercise, where the professor said that in order to have this like communications exercise, it was phrased according to the student in this really bizarre way. There didn't seem to be any educational goals to it other than to just get students talking to one another. But it required students to ask questions that were listed on the sheet. And on the sheet were questions like, what turns you on? Do you think that females um, are, or do you think that males are superior to females? Uh, and then it asks like other probing questions about religion, sexuality, criminal history, just things that make absolutely no sense for why anybody would have to ask these why anybody would have to ask these questions for a communications course.
Right.
The second assignment was uh, probably the one that explicitly was related to DEI because it had students imagine that they are a crisis manager for a company. Now, when you read the question, it actually makes a lot of sense for a communications class because if you're a communications professional, you're going to be handling PR crises when you leave when you get your degree and you go work as a communications director for any company. But what made it DEI related was it said that of all of the options that you have at your disposal to repair the company's reputation is to implement a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. Clearly, this is how institutions are keeping DEI in the curriculum. It's
Mm,
how they're creating these foot soldiers once they graduate. Because ultimately, of course, these people are going to get into the workforce and they're going to tell their boss, "Oh, the company's in a PR crisis. Let's try to salvage our PR crisis by telling the public that we're going to implement a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan," which is,
yeah.
of course, going to be racially discriminatory, which is of course built politically off of which is built totally off of political ideology. It doesn't actually solve a PR crisis. It's not a moral fix for an ethical failure of a corporation. And yet, this is what's being told to people in communications classes. And
Yeah,
so, and then the other thing to recognize is that this is being taught to students in a state that has gone to great lengths to get rid of DEI.
right,
You had you had the Senate bill that took down the bureaucracies of DEI at public colleges and universities, and then you more recently had the state legislature pass anti-DEI bills to get DEI ideology out of the K-12 system.
right.
Then Governor Greg Abbott signed his own executive order saying you have to get rid of DEI at public institutions altogether. And of
Yeah.
course, we have the federal mandates from the Trump administration saying to get rid of DEI. This is just one example of, I'm sure, many that show how this stuff stays in the curriculum despite all of the laws.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me, I had coffee a few months ago with someone from Stanford who said that Trump is wasting this moment. As with so many things, personnel is policy, and you can have all the executive orders and statutes you want. If the people in the system are determined to propagandize and sexualize their students, they will proceed to do that. And that's who is in the system. So we need a personnel change because people of reason, people of traditional morals have been purged from the education system. It's happened over the past 50, 60 years. They didn't broadcast it.
Yeah,
But it was full speed ahead. This is what the books by Roger Kimball were about, Tenured Radicals by Alan Bloom, The Closing of the American Mind. We had something from Dinesh D'Souza. I mean, there have been
yeah,
many books documenting this development. The Trump moment really should be a moment of a reverse purge to balance.
yeah,
People need to be ridiculing diversity ideology as an obvious attempt to divide and conquer, as a form of psychological warfare against Western peoples,
yeah,
advancing social engineering goals that have a record of failure. There needs to be balance, at the very least, balance to expose these bankrupt ideologies for what they are, to laugh at them. They are not, I know young people working for companies who go through DEI training and they laugh. It's all a joke to them. This is
yeah,
top down stuff that has real limits because reality in the end wins. But the
yeah.
poison of the education system cannot be neutralized until we bring neutralizing people in, which is to say, balancing the ideological fanatics with people of reason and people of traditional morality.
Well, to just only prove your point about how you have the ideological fanatics still in the institutions, it's with this communications class, it's taught by a professor named Dr. Alan Grant. And according to his faculty profile on the Texas State website, he this is him saying this, frequently works social justice initiatives into his classroom environment. And then he notes that that his teaching assistants are assembled by him choosing various nationalities, ethnicities, and sexual persuasions. Why is somebody choosing their teaching assistants based off of that rationale? More importantly, he also says that he assigns these teaching assistants many lectures that are aligned with their academic focus, which is, according to him, understanding Latinx, the Korean exchange, and balancing binaries. What is challenging binaries?
Yeah.
What does that mean to challenge binaries? And then lastly, he says that his whole goal is to meet students where they are ideologically, and then he wants to institute sessions specifically related to race, class, gender, and ability, which I assume that by ability, as a leftist, he means like disability or something like that. Uh, and then his current research is what he calls, or I couldn't believe this was a term, racial ventriloquism, which is
Right.
the idea that when somebody from a majority group, which he means whites, speak about minority issues, they are effectively impersonating those minorities,
Mhm.
which he says is racist.
Yeah, it's just psychological warfare against the West. The wolf in sheep's clothing, and people have to call it out for what it is. So I think that's an interesting take that a lot of this is a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing if we don't balance these
Right.
colleges and universities. And of course, parents, you said that, people are wondering if they should send their kids to college. Of course, people should be opting out of college for a million reasons to avoid indoctrination, to avoid sexual promiscuity that goes along with that, to avoid the psychological warfare being waged against people of European descent and of Christian heritage, to avoid student loan debt, to get started in real life, to get a real job, to really figure out how you can contribute to
Yeah.
your community, neighborhood, and your country. So, a million reasons. But as you point out, people will say Harvard has gone bad. It's just so terrible. But then when their kid gets into Harvard, they want to send their kid to Harvard.
Yeah.
It's a weird image control. It's
Well, one of
people have, I'm sorry, go ahead.
one of the l one of the main reasons why people should stop sending their kids to college is that the promise of a job afterwards is not even true anymore. First off,
Right,
it was never a purpose of college to get a job,
right,
but colleges commercialize themselves as institutions that you have to get a job. But now the unemployment for new graduates is higher than the unemployment rate of the rest of the economy because, again, they're competing for jobs against a globalized society. They're competing for jobs against foreign nationals who have come here. They're
and will
also
work for less.
and will work for less, but they're also just competing for opportunities that are limited to begin with. The world doesn't need, a million PhDs, working on whatever.
Right.
It needs, a lot of these entry level positions in the first place didn't require a college degree to begin with, and so why would you go into debt?
Artificial
Oh,
age, everything is fake.
yeah. Well, my brother is a really good example of this right now, and I feel really bad, and I might actually end up writing something on him. Um, this is my second brother, so the one after me, Devin, he graduated salutatorian. He's currently working on his PhD. The other one also graduated salutatorian from the same school. His name's Brady. He is straight A student, a 4.0, had all kinds of scholarships, very bright. His technical skills are incredibly good. He's had 3 engineering internships, and he can't get a single interview for any other company except GP in Mississippi, and GP just told him today that after all these rounds of interviews that they put him through and the bureaucratic nonsense that they told him to go through, they put him through a humility test and a DEI thing and all this stuff and said, "Oh, we're sorry, but it's just not going to work out." After wasting his time, what was the
Yeah.
point in putting in all of that effort to be such a bright student and
Now,
then
I'm sorry, Jared, did you say he was in high school, or are you talking
no,
about
in
his?
college. So
Okay.
he Yeah, so he's graduating with 2 degrees, both of them in engineering and a minor in another engineering. So he did all the right things. He went to STEM, which,
Yeah,
the route you're supposed to go, but
right.
he graduated salutatorian from his high school.
Ah,
And
okay.
so, how much and he's had multiple internships that were unpaid, unpaid internships,
Hmm.
uh, and now he's facing this crisis, graduating with, an engineering with 2 engineering degrees and a minor
Does
in.
he ask, after an interview, sometimes you can say, if you could just let me know how I could improve for next time or what was the issue. Of course, employers are not forthcoming with that because that's
Yeah.
a liability landmine. But is
Mhm.
there, do you have any evidence of a real backstory? Like,
I will have to develop one. I mean, or search for it. I mean, if there is.
do you know who's getting hired in place of him? Might be one place to start.
Yes, I do know, but I don't wanna
Okay.
spill all the cards right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The
But I
let's
mean,
GP is a DEI company.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So enough said. Um, yeah. So, well, we'll have to brainstorm about what role we can play in this. Um, it's an unacceptable, indefensible crossroads where we are. We cannot continue to do this to our young people and survive as a country.
Mhm.
And that we might be losing the leader we thought we had in President Trump is just
Yeah.
it's more than devastating. So I don't know where this goes from here, although maybe we could I don't know, have a conference on something like that. One idea is federalism. Let's stop looking to national leaders and start looking to states who are going to get serious about helping American young people. But that can be a topic. Maybe you and I can circle back and talk if we would want to do a round table about that because put not your faith in princes. Um, we're not supposed to be worshiping people like Donald Trump or political figures. Maybe we're going to the wrong street corner to figure this out. But all right, so we've been going about an hour. I do think that we have covered the topics that we wanted to. Any last words, Jared?
There is only one thing that we didn't cover that you mentioned at the beginning, and that is the, Naval Academy. We talked a little bit about military history, and to just quickly, mention, our colleague Kaylee wrote
Right.
a fantastic piece for Veterans Day. It got widely shared. Um, I helped her with that insofar that I gave her a contact who graduated from the Naval Academy in Maryland. And this person, who will keep anonymous, had to go through all kinds of DEI, woke education at the Naval Academy while Biden was president. And so Kaylee documents some of that. But we also have made a pledge in that article to do a bit more on military history. And that's a good segue to just mention the American Revolution Project,
Uh-huh.
which will now be on its own website. So we're doing a lot of things.
Yes. Yes. Everybody should go to both nas.org, MTC, is that it?
Mm.
MTC.org,
Mindingthecampus.org.
mindingthecampus.org, and then VAS, which is the Virginia Association of Scholars, which is actually in the process of getting rebuilt. But yes, Jared, you're doing a great job with all the submissions, all the publications, and all the traffic. And, the nature of what we do, it's not like we build a house and look at a house. We're trying to rebuild a culture. So we just have to have faith that by talking about these things, what goes in the minds and souls of everyone matters because the house is the result of the idea of building a house. So ideas do matter. What we're doing does matter, even though it's not tangible. We don't see it immediately. So thank you for your time. And we'll look forward to the next show.